comedy cavalcade. The fight in Kamashida's castle had begun to feel more like a slaughter for the poor newly started phantom thieves of hearts. The small squad of three teenagers and their cat-like companion were torn to shreds fighting the shadow of their abusive school coach Suguru Kamashida. The four of them were in over their heads, no matter how much they didn't want to admit it with how much pain they were in, as the monster Kamashida's shadow transformed into earlier shifted into its original form, his eyes glowing a bright hue of shining gold. As he stared at them with a smirk wide across his face, the intimidating hunk of a man looked over one of the thieves in particular, none other than the alluring girl his real self was. The predator of Antikamaki, currently dressed in a torn-up red latex jet like a bright panther, highlighting her curves as she struggled to get up. Both gazed into one another as he stepped forward, Kamashida with a mix of contempt and lust and Anne with pure rage, yelling at the top of her throat, "No, no. Get away from me, you monster," clearly crying behind her mask, doing her best to get him away despite her tired state. All the king could do was stare and laugh at Anne, keeping a massive smirk across his face as he stumped down to the ground, calling, "Guards. Take the boys and the cat thing back to the dungeon, I'll deal with them later. I'll give some special time to this faker of my precious and right here." Just as he commanded those words, a swarm of shadowy guards with blue masks and dull armor obeyed his words, grabbing Ren, Ryuji, and Morgana right away without any troubles, as their bodies and spirits were too damaged to resist, leaving an angry Anne on the floor, barely crawling towards the nearest wall with practically no effort on the king's part. Anne was left as desperate as she could, Kamashida's shadow towering over her, as she cowered pathetically. Her entire face, now without the mask that hid it before, was teary with makeup running down every inch of it, almost completely able to look at Kamashida in the face out of fear and anger, as the young model yelled out, "I said get away, you bastard. I don't care anymore about what the fuck you think about me. I kill myself before getting touched by you ever again," with all the energy left in her voice, hard to say through the oceans of tears erupting from her eyes. "Oh, you poor little fool, I honestly feel a bit of pity for you now," said Kamashida, keeping his hateable smirk, while he cornered Anne with every second. "You know what? I'll show a bit of mercy. I already have a better version of you here anyway." Upon saying those words, he began to whistle loudly as Anne's cognitive double suddenly came by his side, sporting her usual bright pink bra and panties with matching cat ears and similar piercing golden eyes to her master. "Honestly, your foolish way of acting now has given me an idea. If you're so adamant of not being like your superior version, then perhaps you can serve as a more graceful fool instead. Does that sound good?" Even though the demeaning and cocky aura emanating off of Kamashida's very being refused to fade, and couldn't help but feel some sort of relief from this disgusting vial of a man. She still backed away though as fast as she could. It was pretty much pure instinct at this point, but it was still noticeably slower. As if she were considering his offer. A conflict quickly began in her head. Did she really want to accept the offer of the most disgusting predator she knew, as someone who offered her a deal like that? No, 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 it just can't be, though Anne in her head, slowly backing away, before Kamashida snapped his fingers, sending a shock in her whole system. "Consider this being a bit more peaceful. You should be thankful to your king," said Kamashida, as he chuckled to himself, still holding the more shadowy Anne by his side, as the shock Anne felt in her whole system quickly expanded. Her leather suit suddenly began to morph in front of her eyes, as she saw her heels suddenly change their entire shape, losing the heel part, as they became a more pointy type of shoe, now both orange and purple in its colors, as a golden cat bell materialized on the very tip. It was at that moment a bit of clarity came to Anne's head, before Kamashida spelled it out. Since you like being the fool for so long, you can get to be one for your king the rest of your life. You shall become the unforgettably foolish court jester. With that single phrase, Anne could feel her entire outfit changing yet again, her tight latex suit suddenly expanding to form a pair of baggy pants, one leg being purple with orange polka dots and the other orange with purple polka dots, now seeming to be her two signature colors up to this point. Their soft, expansive nature was suddenly met with a tight belt that was bright yellow in color with equally bright pink hearts painted on it, going much higher than usual, being right below her belly button. Strangely, despite how silly and not at all fashionable it was, Anne felt a giggle trying to come from her mouth, as bright pink suspenders quickly began to attach to the belt, stretching the short distance from her highly placed belt to her shoulders and back to the other side. As much as she tried to deny it, Anne was having an amusing time with how the costume felt on her, thinking to herself, I mean, it is kinda cute for the king not even catching herself on what she just called Kamashida, as she held in her giggle. Even more of her outfit began to materialize soon right after, though, consisting of a checkered red and white top with wide and poofy shoulders, outfitted with a set of 3 purple and orange buttons on top, even showing a small bit of skin that was gradually turning snow white. The same shade went right all the way down her covered-up legs and largely exposed arms, her hands quickly covered by massive cartoonish white gloves, curiously missing a finger. Yet again, Anne didn't mind a thing, as a small bit of her upcoming giggle came from her mouth like a small bit of air exiting a balloon. The snow-white tone of her skin then crawled up Anne's head, dyeing every single bit of it white and painting on all kinds of makeup in the form of bright pink kitty-like whiskers and orange and purple hearts across her eyes, although they were quickly covered up by a red mask, reminiscent of the classic theater comedy mask with a smiling cat's face. Meanwhile, Anne's hair was going, just as crazy as the rest of her new look, becoming what appeared to be a mix of a honey blonde and a bright strawberry pink, defying all senses of gravity, as it began to morph from Anne's usual pigtails on her shoulders to massively multicolored afros on both sides of her head, just as silly as the rest of her jet. The only step left now, toward Anne, was her head, and the signs were already showing with how much more wild her laughing had become. Now from its past small noises, the laughing was near constant, sounding like little schoolgirls' giggles, before they were erupting into a storm of guffaws and chortles from her belly, each laugh handily removing a pecky memory from her human life. All the time with Shiho, joining the Phantom Thieves, even what she remembered of the real Sugiro Kamashida was getting erased by the second, all to become the most perfectly obedient jester in her king's court. The spiral of madness and loyalty quickly even erased Anne's own name from her memory, now going by her title Little Kitty Cherished, chosen by her king to match such a silly clown like herself. Now, everything finally felt finished as the amount of laughing from Anne, or now just Little Kitty, ended as suddenly as it started, speaking the newly spawned pink rubber nose on her mask, as she said, "Greeting my king, it's great to see you." Without further delay, I shall display your highly demanded Little Kitty Chair Chest Super Duper Comedy Extravaganza, and with that, Kamasha the Perfectly got to resume his role as the king of his castle, lounging in his throne, as Little Kitty promoted all forms of jokes and stunts to please her king, now just as much of a shadow as the rest of what inhabited the place. Even if sinister, you couldn't deny the little pinch of humor.